Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. And today's episode is One Punch Man, Season 1, Episode 3, The Obsessive Scientist. Our episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of what happened within this episode. So the episode begins with a narration of who Dr. Genus is, and we learn that he was a very smart child, a child prodigy, the center of attention, the center of the world's eyes. However, at some point, he came up with a crazy idea that human beings needed to evolve further than what they are, seeing all of those around him as dumb animals and him as the prime example of where humanity might be able to go. After 70 years of working on it and becoming an old man, he restored his youth, started cloning himself. Then he started experimenting on animals before moving up into human experimentation in order to create his creations, such as the armored gorilla, Beast King, etc., etc. Saitama then interrupts, and we find out that Armored Gorilla was narrating this backstory and basically says he doesn't have all day. Genos then says that he needs to keep it short, and Armored Gorilla basically says that Dr. Genos wants to study Saitama's body, which seems to have overcome the limitations of humanity, which fits into the House of Evolution. So Saitama then decides that because there's a sale the next day, he and Genos are going to go and face Dr. Genos at the House of Evolution today. And they then run all the way there. Once they arrive, actually, before they arrive, Dr. Genos starts to make his preparations. He sets up traps on the first 8 floors and then goes into the basement to release the strongest creation he's made to date, called Carnage Kabuto, who is basically based on like some type of beetle. And a lot of his clones are killed, and once he feels like the bloodlust is satisfied, he then goes in to talk to Carnage Kabuto and basically ask him to please bring Saitama. It's a sample he absolutely must have. And if he does so, then he's releasing Carnage Kabuto for this purpose. He then ends up getting dragged along, which causes him a lot of injuries, while Carnage Kabuto goes searching for the targets, which is Saitama. Saitama and Genos arrive at the House of Evolution. Genos uses his flames to blast away the building and all of the 8 floors before they then head into the basement. Once they head into the basement, they then run into Carnage Kabuto in the hallway, who immediately strikes Genos and into the wall because Dr. Genus says that he only wants Saitama as a sample. Carnage Kabuto then invites Saitama into their special battle room where they test their combat abilities, which has like armored walls to mitigate damage, supposedly. So Saitama agrees, and then once they're in the room, Genos then reappears, and he first tries to fight Carnage Kabuto and does end up losing pretty spectacularly, though it is spectacular because there's flamethrowers, there's bullets, there's one that ends the fight is he sends his flames at Carnage Kabuto, who manages to reverse them and send them back with just his breath, and basically Genos is outclassed, face cracking, hair burned up into like an afro look, and then basically Saitama then comes forward to fight Carnage Kabuto, and Carnage Kabuto goes to make an attack, suddenly becomes terrified, retreats all the way to the wall, and then yells out, "How did you get so strong?" Saitama then reveals some of his backstory with his training regimen that led to him becoming as strong as it is. Of course, Genos calls bullshit because that's just a normal routine that like anybody could do. It's not even like that difficult. But Saitama assures him that that was all he did. And this then gives Carnage Kabuto some confidence because he's like, well, if that's all he did, he can't actually be that strong. So he then goes on a rampage, evolves his form up to its like carnage mode, and then starts attacking Saitama, who is completely distracted because when he was evolving, he said that he was going to be on a rampage for 1 week. And that means that Saitama had the wrong date, and the sale that he thought was tomorrow was actually today. And he gets hit around, taking like no damage whatsoever for a little bit before he then basically punches Carnage Kabuto and then freaks out about missing the sale, which Genos assures him they'll still be able to make. So they leave. And once they leave, Dr. Genos, who has witnessed the whole thing, basically says that he's done with evolution. So now that we have been reminded about what happened in the episode, we're going to rank the episode as always on our two lists. The mostly objective ranking list, which is void emotion, but bias and judgment can still apply, and then the personal ranking list, which is where the emotion applies. So now we come to our mostly objective rank values, and I've highlighted those I felt applied within this episode. So first off, we have +1 point for our single episode supporting character introduction, which was Carnage Kabuto, who is based on a beetle and is the strongest creation of Dr. Genos. We then have +2 points for our multi-episode supporting character development, which is Dr. Genos's backstory at the start of the episode. And then by the end of the episode, he has decided that he's done with evolution and the person that needs to change is in fact him, not everybody else in the world. Which you could argue is character growth, but I think that was also just part of the development we saw in the episode. So that's 3 points total. Then I have the next two kind of tie together. So the impactful or memorable moment line, etc., which to me is the revealing of Saitama's training regimen, which is honestly one of the things in this series that made me incredibly amused. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous, but the very fact of its ease and the ridiculousness of how easy it was given how strong he is what makes it so funny to me. But anyways, the training regimen. So this also ties into our multi-season main character development, which is where the intense training regimen he followed is revealed. And that is 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, and a 10-kilometer run every day. And you have to make sure that you eat 3 meals a day, though banana for breakfast is fine. You cannot use heat or AC in the winter or summer. You have to train your mind as well, even if it makes you feel like you're dying or you're spitting up blood. Then, after a year and a half, you may notice a difference. For example, you may be bald, and you likely will be stronger. To summarize, essentially, you have to train until your hair falls out. And of course, this is what everybody calls bullshit on because it's pretty normal. Well, I would imagine it would be normal for like athletes and such to train to this degree on a daily basis. And even if you train to that degree on a daily basis, if you're a normal human, it's not going to have the effect that it does for Saitama, obviously. But Genos then basically says, I want to know your real secret. But Saitama assures him that that's just what he did. And we do get treated to a flashback of him going through the training regimen, of how difficult it was for him to do, back when he had hair and was weak. But it also highlights how far he came from the weakness that he had at the start. which brings us to a 10 out of 10 episode. However, of course, there are negatives, and the negative messaging or behavior that I felt was worth -2 points in this episode was the human experimentation. I just couldn't get past that. That's a very evil thing to do, and that's obviously very negative behavior and negative messaging because, you should not be doing that. But that makes this episode an 8 out of 10 on our mostly objective ranking, which makes the season ranking so far on our mostly objective ranking to in first, the strongest man, second, the lone cyborg, and then this episode, the obsessive scientist, comes in third. So for this episode, I really enjoyed it. The backstory at the start was good information, it was giving us more information on the villain. However, given that this was the last episode the villain was going to appear in, and it wasn't like one of like a major villain, I did feel like we could have left it behind, really. But I did love that at the end of basically when Saitama interrupts that they don't have all day. I love how Genis basically steals the same line that Saitama said to him in the last episode. He basically said that my master is a busy man, so 20 words or less, which is exactly what Saitama, when he snapped at Geno, said 20 words or less. Loved that because it called back. I love how they had to go and attack now because there's a sale the next day, and then how after while he's fighting Kabuto basically goes on a rampage in Carnage mode, saying that the Carnage mode rampage will last for 1 week from Saturday to Saturday, which is when Saitama realizes that if it's from Saturday to Saturday, that makes today Saturday, which is the day of the sale. And as he's coming to this conclusion, Kabuto's attacking him and he's, bouncing off the walls into the ground, taking no damage. And then, when he realizes it, he basically like comes out of his like worry, coming to the conclusion and basically punches Kabuto out. And then he's like on his knees. Why? Why is this happening to me? Like, it's like the worst thing that's ever happened. And Dr. Genis is confused, but Genos comes over and kindly explains that the reason that his master's upset is because of this and holds up the flyer about the sale on Saturday. And then he goes over to Saitama and comforts him and says, you know what? If we run, the store's open till 10 p.m. That's still 4 hours. We can make it. And this, of course, cheers Saitama up, and then they leave. And this is when Dr. Genis basically says, I'm giving up on evolution. And then there's the scene where, of course, when they first arrive at the House of Evolution, Genos, instead of going through the 8 floors of traps, just basically blasts it away so that the entire building and most of the cliffside it was built into is gone. And he then essentially says that he thought it would be easier to just skip that part. And then Saitama says that it's kind of mean not to see what the bad guys had in store for them, kind of admonishing Genos for, taking the bad guys' fun away, which I thought was hilarious. The point is, this episode was really funny, and I love things that can make me laugh, especially when you add in like action comedy is one of the best genres in my opinion. Like straight up action can get a bit repetitive and boring over time, but when you add in that comedy factor, that's what makes it interesting. That's what brings in the interest and the changing it up of uppedness of it. The variety, that's what I meant. And I really liked this episode because of all of those comedic episode like moments. However, like I said, with the opening introduction of the scientist's backstory, Dr. Genis, we didn't really need that because he's now not there anymore. He's given up on evolution. He's not the villain anymore. He was teased in the last episode, he had a minor role, and then this episode, he was setting his creations on Saitama, but again, did we need to know about his backstory? It's nice it was there, didn't necessarily actually need it. And then Carnage Kabuto was a bit of a icky character, honestly. Personality was bad, appearance was bad. I mean, he was strong enough to face Genos, he had a cool evolution, but ultimately, I wasn't fond of the character. I understand the plot purpose for the character, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. So that then, and then in the post-credit scene, we then see investigators investigating Genos's last attack, like Genos's attack, and it shows that there is something like some sort of official body that is aware of Genos, as they mention how it has the same hallmarks as the other scenes left behind by the young cyborg. So, ultimately, I gave it a 9 out of 10 because it did have its faults, but it is a very good and very funny episode. As I mentioned before, the training regimen never laughed so hard at this show. It's my favorite moment throughout probably the entire series, to be honest, because I think it's just so ridiculous. Anyways, that brings our season ranking so far in our personal ranking to the obsessive scientist in first, the strongest man, and then the lone cyborg coming in third. And so our series ranking so far in our mostly objective ranking is at 28 out of 120 for season 1, and then on our personal ranking it is 25 out of 120 so far in season 1. So with that, we've now rewatched and ranked One Punch Man Season 1, Episode 3, The Obsessive Scientist. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.